Okay, well, I'd like to introduce our next speaker now. Gaby Lawson works at Monash College in Melbourne, and she's going to be presenting on activities for more resilient and engaged students. Thanks, Gaby.
Hi, thanks, Sophie. I'll just share my screen. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen and hear me. I'll just try and move that out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to look at 8 strategies for more resilient and engaged learners. So in this presentation, the first half, I'd like to concentrate on understanding why ELICOS students may lack resilience and engagement. And in the second half of the talk, I'd like to look at 8 strategies we can use for building resilience and engagement in either the face-to-face classroom or the virtual classroom. So I'm going to start by telling you about a little piece of research that was done by Muller and Dweck in 1998. They took primary school students, 128 fifth graders, and the students were given a puzzle which they were asked to complete. And when they completed the puzzle, they had the students in 2 groups. One group was told, you must be smart, and the other group was told, you must have done a lot of work. Now, the children were only given 1 sentence of feedback, and that was controlled as part of the experiment. Then, in the next part of the experiment, the researchers gave the groups a second puzzle, one that was too hard for the students to manage successfully. So I'm just going to do a quick Zoom poll. We'll get Sophie to do a quick Zoom poll on, how do you think the children in the group who were praised for intelligence reacted when they were subsequently given a more difficult puzzle? So the group that were told, you're really smart at this, how do you think they reacted? I don't know if it's possible for me to see the results. Maybe Sophie can see the results. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Sophie. Okay. So, it's interesting. Half of you thought that the students that were told they were intelligent would be motivated, and half of you think the other way. So that's really interesting, because the researchers thought that the ones that were praised for intelligence would be more confident than the other ones when they had a more difficult puzzle that they couldn't do. But they were really surprised when the result was that actually the ones who were praised for intelligent were less confident and more anxious when they were given a more difficult puzzle. So they were told, you're smart at this. They were given a second difficult puzzle that they couldn't do. And then their sense of self collapsed, and they suddenly became really demotivated, and they didn't feel like they could succeed. So Carol Dweck was really interested in why that would be. So So she did some subsequent studies to investigate this further, and she discovered that the reason why the ones who were praised for intelligence were not motivated and became afraid of failing was because the goal of students becomes winning positive judgments. And other behaviours in subsequent research that they displayed were avoiding challenges, so avoiding work, performance goals, just being interested in getting an A in the test, but not really being interested in what they were learning. Some other really unfortunate ones in class culture, tearing other students down, wanting to know other students' marks, being happy when other students did worse than them. And in one study, they said they would even consider cheating to get the mark they need. So she argued that students do this because they become from a belief that looking smart is the goal and that it's not learning that's the goal. So, this is known quite popularly as a fixed mindset, and it's a key to understanding a lack of engagement, because students will suffer from learned helplessness if they believe that their ability in something is fixed. So, for example, if it's listening skills, if they think that that they just, maybe you have a talent for listening or you don't have a talent for listening, then if they feel like they haven't got a talent for listening, they feel like they've got no control over the situation. Because if you've either got it or you haven't, it doesn't matter what you do, that's not going to change. So symptoms of this view, they may be familiar to you. The first one is avoiding work that they don't think they can manage successfully. And the second one is becoming really anxious or crying or sweating or sleepless. Even if, to you've done the diagnostics, and as far as you can tell, they probably will pass the listening test, but if in their own minds, they're in danger of failing, or if anything less than an A+ or an ER is a fail in their own mind, they're still going to exhibit those behaviours. So Carol Dweck concludes that a fixed mindset, students believe that their basic abilities, their intelligence, their talents are fixed. They have a certain amount and that's it. And so their goal becomes to look smart all the time and never look dumb. And she said, these are simply a hand you're dealt with, that you have to live with. You're always trying to convince yourself and others that you have a royal flush when you're secretly worried that you have a pair of 10s. So what the strategies are based on is trying to promote a growth mindset, but it's a work in progress. People don't have a fixed mindset or have a growth mindset. We have different mindsets about different things at different times in different areas. So to promote a growth mindset, people believe that their abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. That brains and talent are just a starting point. This creates a love of learning and a resilience that she says is essential for great accomplishment. So this is something that people have been looking at in primary and secondary for a while. And now researchers in English language teaching, Knowles and Liu, for example, argue that supporting a growth mindset in students is an important way for English language learners to sustain their motivation and resilience. And Mercer and Ryan note that for English language learners, it might not be just I'm good at English, I'm not good at English. It might be about the different skills. So it might be about whether you feel like you're good at reading or grammar or listening or pronunciation. You might have a growth mindset in grammar and a fixed mindset in listening, for example. So the resilience comes from a mindset that a difficult problem, like the puzzles we were talking about earlier, is a challenge to overcome. So for example, if learners have a listening exam, maybe they had a mid-course listening exam and they didn't do well in it, and if they feel like they have no control over their listening skills, then they're going to be very demotivated and not very engaged. So problems that we've had, for example, we set up all of these extra listening workshops for students and they don't go. The ones who do go are the ones who don't need to go, and the ones who need to go won't go because of this symptom of the fixed mindset, because they feel like they're avoiding the problem. So it's based on 40 years of cognitive research, and it helps us as teachers to understand why students behave the way they do. But what the research doesn't do is it doesn't tell us how to mitigate that. So how do we turn conclusions from research into strategies for teaching practice? Well, in primary and secondary, they've been working on it. So here are 8 things that may be familiar to you or maybe not, but we can kind of understand them through through understanding why students lack engagement or lack resilience from our understandings from growth mindset. So number 1 is to teach students about how brains work. 2 is differentiation or mixed ability teaching. 3, cultivating a mistake-friendly classroom. 4 is believing in your students. 5 is something Carol Dweck calls the power of yet. 6, giving feedback effectively. 7, having feedback that goes 3 ways. And the last one, which was mentioned just before, creating a safe space for your learners. It's really important. So we'll start with the first one about neuroplasticity. So understanding that brains, like when we learn something new, the neural pathways connect. And the first few times they might misfire, and that's when we make mistakes. And then as they gradually hit more reliably, the brain actually coats those neural pathways in a layer of fat so that it becomes more like a freeway than somebody hacking a path through a jungle. But if you don't use it, the jungle grows back again. So understanding that is something you can help students, because obviously curricula and syllabus are packed. We always have to do 6 different things at the same time. So you could do it as a jigsaw reading or speaking activity, a note-taking video. I've put a link here to a good YouTube video it's about 2.5 minutes long, about how brains work. Reading comprehension activity. If you have a low-level group, like a level 3, labelling the diagram of a brain or something, very simple, that's not so text-heavy. So if learners understand that mistakes are the result of the process of neural pathways forming, they're much more likely to be less afraid of making mistakes. So the next strategy, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is differentiating or mixed ability teaching. It's really important. So we know from Vygotsky, and there's not any conflict between Vygotsky and this, if the material is too difficult, learners will be disengaged. So you have to scaffold tasks so they feel like they're making progress. So according to Atkins and Schifrin's expectancy value theory, we need to feel like we're making progress. However, sometimes what we don't remember is that if the material is too easy, learners can also be disengaged. So Dweck suggests that maybe you counsel students with, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't challenged you enough. Let's find a way to really stretch you, and give them extension work that's meaningful and purposeful, not just, a few extra activities to do, because otherwise they're likely to focus on the product rather than the process. So if it takes them 5 minutes to do the homework, it takes the rest of the class 60 minutes to do, and they haven't done that homework, then they're likely to, and they've done that homework really quickly, and they go, okay, well, that's job done. I can go and play on my PS4 now. They're less likely to see it as part of English language learning and more like a kind of product thing. So you kind of discourage, put the emphasis on process by really stretching those learners that are strong in particular skills. So to come back to the mistake-friendly classroom, we talked about how they need to understand the brain science, because we had a student who came to us at PDD last November who told us about how when she was in primary school, her English teacher used to stand them all up and they had to give the answer to the gap fill question. And if they didn't get it right, they would be humiliated in front of the rest of the class. So if we're receiving students who have had that experience, just telling them at the beginning of the course, you can make mistakes, that's fine, isn't going to change their behaviour because they've been traumatised. So I think we need to make sure that they understand the science behind the mistakes, and then praise the students maybe for giving an answer. Doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. So for example, if a student gives you a really intelligent mistake, go, thanks, that's a great mistake. I really like that you gave me an answer. Okay, let's look at the mistake as a team, so that you're praising the giving of the answer rather than going, you're on the right track, but that's not quite what I was looking for. So that's one suggestion. And Brock and Huntley also suggest you could take it further with mistake of the week, my favourite mistake. So these are all positive ways to encourage students to be more engaged. And another thing that you can do to make them more engaged is research shows that teacher beliefs about student intelligence impact students' beliefs about their own intelligence. So if you have a student who's disengaged, and it can be difficult sometimes, could you be accidentally giving them the impression that you don't believe that they can succeed either? It's not that they're necessarily going to pass the course, but that they can succeed eventually, and that you believe in them. Because if they feel like you don't believe in them, they're definitely, according to research, not going to believe in themselves. And sometimes we can do this involuntarily with our facial expressions or our body language. So we have to be really kind of careful about how we're interacting with students who are struggling. Okay, so I'll explain the power of yet, because this is a great strategy. So if you're, for example, if you're giving feedback and you've got a student who's struggling, and rather than just giving them the feedback, your grammar is weak, you would give them the feedback, the time tenses in this piece of work are not accurate enough for you to reach the test requirements yet. So it's not enough yet, which opens up the possibility of a discussion about strategies that the student can use to get to where they want to go. And then you can suggest some videos, some online quizzes, some things that they can do in order to improve those time tenses. And you can put it into rubrics. So for example, our old rubrics at Monash College were does not meet requirements, meets requirements, exceeds requirements. And what we could have done is we could have changed it to does not meet requirements yet. And just by putting that yet into the rubric, students are more likely to engage if they feel like, rather than, oh, I failed, that I just haven't got there and I can get there eventually. And I think that's a really good idea and not difficult to do. Now, the resilience comes from being able to manage negative feedback. So you can proactively reduce, I touched on this before, the likelihood that they're going to have a strong negative reaction to feedback. For example, do you have students that don't even want to look at the feedback that they get? It might be because they can't separate themselves from their work. So instead of sort of saying, okay, you're here on the descriptors and to improve, you need to do this and this and this, try emphasising that it's the work that we're talking about. Your work is here and you need to improve this piece of work in this way in order to meet these criteria. So the focus is on this piece of work that we're talking about now, not you, the student. And using descriptors is a good way to avoid discussions about, this is good, this is bad, but either this meets it or it doesn't meet it yet. And similarly, train them to do that in peer feedback. If you've got a student who thinks they're genuinely not trying though, maybe you could counsel them by saying, is this really your best work? And if it isn't, maybe actively listen when they tell you why. Maybe they need support. Send a follow-up email. Hi, today we talked about this and this and this and this, and these are some strategies that you can put in place to manage these problems. And so I think that's finding out why the student's engaged by listening to them and then sending a follow-up email in case if their English isn't good, they didn't really understand a lot of the discussion, is a professional way of making sure that they're getting the support that they need and that they're a bit more engaged. And so you can model taking feedback as well for the students that find taking feedback difficult. You can use exit tickets. So you can see these little, the easiest way to do exit tickets is just to ask them, what's one thing I learned? What's one thing I still don't understand? Or how did the lesson go? How are you feeling? They write it on the thing and they stick it on the door on the way out of the classroom. Google Forms are great for this online. If you take feedback on your teaching, then you're modelling that it's going in 3 directions. Student to student, you to the student, student to you. You can encourage peer feedback and train learners how to do it effectively with summative descriptors and sentence starters, things like, maybe next time you could, how about trying, so, because it's language teaching, there's a lot of grammar and vocab that you can integrate into lessons on how to give peer feedback. Try to stick to 3 pieces of feedback and, as I said before, make sure that that's actionable. If you want to focus on student progress, focus on how they've come so far and strategies for next time in order to build resilience. So don't comfort them by saying, it's okay, you failed the mid-course listening test, you're good at other things, or it's okay, you failed the mid-course listening test, you're pretty. That's not going to increase their resilience. Try something like what Carol Dweck suggests. Okay, so you didn't do as well as you wanted. Let's look at this as an opportunity to learn. You're not there yet. Or look at how much progress you've made on this. Do you remember how challenging this was at the beginning of the course or last week? Or maybe investigate, okay, so what did you do to prepare this time for this assessment or this presentation? How could you do it differently next time? Let's plan together how you're going to do it for next time. So finally, I'd like to talk about what I think Franca touched on, about making the classroom a safe space and managing the rules of belonging. So students need to feel like they can make mistakes and be themselves. So it's important to be vigilant with your classroom management, because one of the most important roles that classroom management plays is making students feel like the classroom is a safe learning environment. So for example, the student might be presenting and some other students might be laughing. Now they might be laughing at something they're looking at on their phone, or But if that student feels like they're laughing at them, that could really affect how safe they feel. So try to learn to train students in how to respond to each other's work. So one thing you can do to do that is to set up classroom respect rules. So if you make the focus of the classroom rules on respecting each other, respecting each other's work, respecting each themselves, you can set up the respect rules and elicit them from the students, maybe add in any that you feel. And you can do that, there's a good example, by getting them to write down what they think on Post-it notes and sticking them all, like how can, after a discussion of how can we respect each other, what is respect, what ways do we respect each other. If you're online, you can do it with Jamboard, if you're familiar with that. Very easy to use, part of Google Suite. Yeah, and be careful, of course, to monitor your own reaction, which we talked about before, to student errors in whole class discussions, in case they're a bit sensitive after having had a negative experience in the past. And so one example I can give you of making the class a safe space is making it LGBTIQ friendly. So, for example, you can put a flag somewhere in the classroom. You can put it on your slides if you're online. You might start the course by saying, "Hi, my name is Gabby. My pronouns are she and her." And that's two strategies you can use for making the classroom a safe space for one particular group of students. But it's, you can do that with any students, making the classroom feel safe in an unobtrusive way. Okay, so finally, how do we build resilience in students? Well, I think we need to understand what cognitive psychologists believe causes a lack of resilience, and we looked at that at the beginning of the presentation. And we can manage disengaged students more professionally if we understand the causes and behaviours of a lack of engagement in an objective and informed way. Because if we understand the ideas of growth mindset and fixed mindset, they can have positive impacts on our teaching if we understand the complexity and the research behind it. You can integrate the strategies into your teaching, practice to increase the resilience for the students who are having challenges. We can set up our materials, our rubrics and our class culture in an informed way. We can proactively increase the levels of engagement and manage disengagement professionally. And so when you've got a student who's disengaged, I would urge you to sort of think about the research and sort of ask yourself the question, what can I change so that this student is more engaged in my lesson? Okay, so we looked at 8 strategies. I'll just go quickly through them again. Teaching students about their brains and how their neural pathways work. Differentiating, making sure the work is not too easy, not too hard. Cultivating a mistake-friendly classroom, but really committing to that with a number of strategies. Interrogating our own ideas about our student and their ability and our face and our body language. Using the power of yet for rubrics, for feedbacks, giving feedback effectively to students, separating the student from their work. Also remembering that feedback needs to go 3 ways: you to the student to you, and students to each other. So students can separate themselves from the work. And finally, and importantly, managing the rules of belonging with a respect rules and creating a safe space for all learners. Okay, so I've put some links there if people are interested. And if you do buy one book, I recommend that it's this one by Annie Brock and Heather Hudley. It's got lesson plans and everything in it. It's been really helpful to me. Okay, so thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Oh, great. Thanks. Thanks so much for that, Gabby. I'm actually a big fan of Carol Dweck and growth mindset. And what I loved about your presentation was the practical examples of application of growth mindset to ELICOS teaching. So it really resonated with me and I'm sure with everyone else here.
Thanks, Sophie.
So there was a question from Kay. She wanted to know if you have any suggestions about dealing with students who take over or who are quite dominant.
Yes, I think that comes back to the respect rules, respecting other people and respecting other people. So having negotiated those respect rules about actively listening, active listening is a big one to kind of get in there if you can't elicit it from the students. And then to say to them, look, I would never talk to a student about something like that in front of the other students. I would wait until everyone is gone or, one-on-one. And then I would say, okay, you need to let other people talk. Do you realise that you're doing this? And then maybe send them a follow-up email. If they keep doing it, if after the first 2 or 3 times we've had that discussion, they don't stop, I might, maybe on the 3rd occasion, I would also send them a follow-up email because it's obviously a serious problem. And just be really clear about the lesson timings and maybe have if you're in a face-to-face classroom, having a hand signal that you organise with the student to sort of remind them without anybody else noticing or the rest of the class that you want them to stop talking because they're being dominating and now they're aware of it. So I think the hand signal, talking to them about it, having respect rules, and then maybe if it continues after 2 or 3 after class chats, maybe sending them an email and coming up with some strategies with them of how they can avoid it and how they can respect other people and listen to them.
Yeah, great. Yeah, you mentioned the idea of a follow-up email in a different context before, and I think it's a great idea actually. So simple, but probably quite powerful.
I think if English is their second language, it's only to give them something that they can refer back to.
Yeah,
understand.
Absolutely. And I think after a conversation, you do go away and think about things and process it, and you probably in the email have a different perspective already on what the person's saying.
Keep the tone friendly, like, hi, today we talked about this, this and this. It was great to talk to you and I hope, we can work towards, in future, just really friendly tone, nothing threatening or official, but I've had a lot of success with that. I found that usually, I have lovely students, I've got to admit, our students are generally pretty lovely, but something like that example, usually a couple of talks, maybe an email and some strategies, and usually in the last 10 years, I think those problems have managed to resolve themselves.
Okay, great. I have a question. I think all the other questions have been answered. Do you feel like you've been successful in the past at cultivating a mistake-friendly classroom?
Look, it's really challenging because students are terrified of making mistakes. And it's also difficult because at the moment I'm only 2 days a week and my co-teacher is 3 days a week. So I find it difficult when I'm picking up the back end of another class. But yes, I think by putting the emphasis on the fact that, mistakes are about learning and explaining to them how brains work, I think if you keep at it and you don't expect an overnight change in their behaviour, because that's a very difficult thing to cast off, they will become more relaxed and try because they can see that that's what you want from them.
Yeah, I think I'd absolutely agree with that. I saw that with my 9-year-old son. He had a teacher for 2 years who every day just came back to growth mindset principles. He really took them on board. And now he has a different teacher and I can see he's sort of forgetting about all those great approaches that he had to making mistakes because it's not an everyday thing that he's being reminded of.
Yeah, the teacher has a lot of impact on the culture of the classroom and the rules of belonging and but I think even within, the longer you have the students, the better. If you've got a 5-week turnaround, it is a really hard ask. But with a 10 or a 20-week course, you can affect some positive changes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again so much, Gaby, and also Franca, for your amazing and insightful presentations today.
Oh, thanks, Sophie.
And I'd like to congratulate once again all of the 2020 Bright Ideas winners. And thank you to Pearson for partnering with us to bring you this festival, and thanks everyone for coming. The slide says see you tomorrow, but that's actually a mistake. We won't see you tomorrow. This is the last day of the Festival of Bright Ideas.
It's all part. It's all right. It doesn't matter. It's just part of the, getting better.
I need you by my side all the time, Gaby.
We're all just doing the best we can. Our online learning, as Franca was saying, it's all new. We just keep trying and making mistakes and getting better.
Right. All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.